Hi everyone, my name is Theodore Hum. I'm here with Mindclef. We provide mental health resources for classical musicians, and today we have Katie and Delanie from Classically Black, and I'd like to give them a chance to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Katie Brown. I'm a violist and I am the co-host of Classically Black podcast. We talk about being black in the profession of classical music. We're coming on year 4, so that's insane. I'm a violist living in Memphis, studying with the Memphis Symphony. Just finished a fellowship with the Memphis Symphony, so just hanging around.
My name is Delanie Harris. I'm the other co-host of Classically Black Podcast. Also just moved, so my lighting is terrible. So sorry about that. But I'm a bass player. Um, Katie and I met in college, kind of, and um, yeah, I mostly like doing arts admin and some music writing and criticism and music industry stuff right
And you both met at Eastman, correct?
now.
A very, very prestigious music school. Congratulations, by the way. And just a little bit of information. Delaney Harris and I actually went to the same high school, and were a part of the same music program, and that's sort of where I heard about Classically Black from. So getting into this, with Eastman, uh, I brought up the diversity stats, and it is over 50% Caucasian, and the
Yep.
African American stats are 1.55. So, and there's other ethnicities, obviously, but just focusing on these two, how's that make you guys feel for like basically like over half of your colleagues are Caucasian, and there's such a small amount of people that you guys can relate to, whether it's culture or just feel comfortable around. So, how did that affect your experience at Eastman?
Well, when you said you brought up the stats, I was like, uh oh. Yeah, one point Eastman's a tiny school, and honestly, 1.55 sounds a little high to me, especially because like across all degree programs, that was sort of the way that we were even able to cultivate a black community there because there really wasn't one before we went, and we were kind of the people that kind of like got everybody together and had like a formal black students union and stuff like that. So yeah, it doesn't feel great to hear those stats, especially since Eastman just celebrated its centennial, 100 years of you know the Eastman School of Music, and just getting to certain points in this conversation, um, sort of just addressing diversity in like a really serious manner. So I think it'll be even a while before we even see like substantial results.
Katie, would you like to add on?
Yeah, so I went to Eastman for grad school. So I think up until this point, like it didn't really affect me like consciously. I'm sure subconsciously. There's there's plenty. But like in my day-to-day life, it didn't because up until that point, like that's just what classical music was to me. Like I'm from a pretty diverse, I don't even know, a relatively diverse suburb of Chicago, and it was used to being when I was doing classical music for it to be in white spaces. Went to college. I was like one of 4 people in the school of music, but I went to a state school. Um, so when I got to Eastman, and then I I was like, oh, it's gonna be more of the same, which like was a little exhausting when I first realized it, but I found comfort. Like my teacher was black, so I was like, okay, well at least I got that. And then my second year at Eastman, that's when everything changed because I met Delanie, and then like she said, we started like cultivating community of black people at Eastman. So then like I had a great time. Like I had too much fun at Eastman. So yeah. But up until then, um, it was just like, oh yeah, this is how it is in classical music.
Well, yes, it is how it is in classical music. So I was just wondering for you guys, do you think your like mental health is affected because of the lack of diversity in classical music?
I think I mean when I was at Eastman, absolutely. Like it was a very like difficult environment socially for me. Um especially just because like I just felt like it just did not fit. Like it really didn't curl all the way over until like I met Katie and a couple of other people again from the Black Students Union, and I think that was really affect my mental health because at the time when I went, like I came to Eastman from an environment where I just was not like even the classical music spaces that I was in weren't overwhelmingly white. Like I was in Inner City Youth Orchestra of Los Angeles, which is the largest majority black youth orchestra in the country. So like I was even coming into Eastman had rarely ever been in environments like that for too long. Like I have been to Interlochen, so that was an environment like that, you know. So I'd been to music camp, but that was 6 weeks and then I was done. I wasn't living there, and so once it got past a certain point, it kind of felt like the whole like I was code switching a lot. It didn't occur to me to just stop doing that. Like so, it just felt like I was kind of like on all the time. Um, Eventually it got, I would say at least socially got a little bit better once I stopped doing that, but in the beginning, yeah, it was pretty detrimental to my mental.
Katie, anything you have to say?
Um, I can't say it did just because I was just so accustomed to it. Like I said, subconsciously maybe, but no, the viola did. The viola did a number on me, but that but being one of few black people, or like really the only in my classes. I was music ed, and then my first year at Eastman, I wasn't taking like too many. Like I didn't get into. I was all doing all music ed, and at the graduate level, those are really small courses. So I was the only black person, but I wasn't focused on that. I was really focused on how overwhelmed I was being at a school of this level, um, and how challenging the viola had become. So I can't say.
And just adding on to this, like mental health that's affected by your diversity and lack of representation in the classical music community. Uh, you know, Females are obviously a lot more prevalent than they used to be. It's about, I'd say, close to 50-50 now. Um, that being said, we do still live in a patriarchy. Does being an African American female also make things a lot harder for you guys, would you say?
I well, for one, I mean, well, for one, I'm a bass player, so that's
Yeah.
also that's a I would say probably even more more so just because that is a male dominated instrument. Um, Surprisingly, my I would say gender wise, my studio at East was actually the most diverse bass studio I had ever been in. Actually, I think by the time I graduated, we were majority female studio, but you know, overall, just in classical music in general, like of course, bass sections are so difficult to sometimes to be in as a woman. Like, I think it gets better with age, but like yeah, I
Yeah, I'm
mean,
always like, what is going on back there? Like,
it's
depending
just
on where I'm sitting.
it's a boys club, like, and it's like sometimes like the whole locker room talk thing where they're like sometimes talking about women that you know, and it's just like kind of like, can we not like you know? So and then I just think yeah, that's kind of like things coming from two sides, being both black and a woman.
I don't know. Patriarchy is just so ingrained into our society. I'm just trying to figure out like anything that jumped out at me. Like I can't. I'm sorry. I'm really trying to think of like a. I mean, besides like general, like I think maybe the most I've experienced it was probably like. Well, hold on. Let me make sure I don't say too much. I did have a teacher recently
Oh,
that was just, but just like that older style of teaching. Because even when I had Mr. Taylor at Eastman, it just was not like he has a daughter. Like it's just, I just think it was different. And like, not the saying that it's that like absolves you from patriarchy like ideas, but I'm just saying like it just wasn't that. But I did have a recent experience with like old style, just like mansplaining me. I'm like, I've been playing the viola for nearly 20 years. Like, And it's like it's
Teaching.
hard. Pardon?
I say and teaching.
And teachings, and it's like it's hard. It was so hard to complain about him because it was like I don't know everything, but also like why are you talking to me like that? So it could have been like I'm a because I'm a woman. It could have been because I'm black. It could be both. It could be like their teaching style. I don't know, but I think that's probably the thing that jumps out to me the most because other stuff than that is just like regular old like concert dress type things. Like I never had a teacher tell me like your skirt too short. Like I never had that, but I've had great teachers. I don't know, like I just haven't. This hasn't been my experience.
Yeah, I think it's really great that you have to like really think about a time when your gender was really hindered you. Um, Sort of moving on to some black composers back in a time where racism and sexism was way more prevalent. There's a composer named Joseph and Boulogne. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that correctly. I know you both are familiar with him, but just for the audience, I want to give a little bit of description. Um, he was known as the Black Mozart. He was the first classical composer of African origins. He conducted the Le Concert des Amateurs, which is at the time one of the greatest orchestras in Europe. And the United States President John Adams judged him as one of the most accomplished men in Europe. And you know, we can't play his music here, but if you listen to his music, it's amazing. I was actually during the pandemic, my teacher had us do listening presentations where he would give us like a prompt, and we would choose like a piece based off the prompt. And one of the prompts was choose a composition by an African American or a black composer, and I ended up actually choosing George Walker's cello concerto, but I was really surprised by how much I loved Ballone's music. It is very similar to Mozart, and I also read that like Mozart was jealous of him and even started rumors about him because he thought that he would never become as good as him. Which to be admired by Mozart in itself is a great accomplishment, and uh, to have him jealous of you, I think, is also great. But we all know the name Mozart, but I just recently heard Ballone's name, and that was because of a prompt. Uh, do you guys think that this has something to do with race, that he's not as well known as Mozart, or just other composers that are Caucasian?
Yeah, absolutely. Even him being known as the Black Mozart is an example of how we know about him via racism. Like the fact that we have to celebrate him by comparing him to someone else or to contextualize him like he wasn't composing right alongside a lot of other people. I think people like to act like, you know, oh, we play Brahms symphonies because Brahms was popular, but Brahms was popular for a reason, right? There are people who were pushed aside, um, and people who were brought to the front. Even if you look at Florence Price's music, like the fact that a lot of her manuscripts were found in an abandoned house between a wall or whatever the story is, like when her music was premiered by the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, um, absolutely. I mean, people want to cover it up and be like, no, we just didn't. Oh no, no, no. I'm like, there's a reason why some stuff is preserved and other things were not.
Yeah, I feel like the whole, like even like Katie said, celebrating him by comparing him to someone else, like it's very clear to see like that his name is even being taken out of by like coining him the Black Mozart. And it's like all of these other composers, like you don't even really even need to use their first names, like but for whatever reason, like with him, even in the conversation, it's like under the whole like Black Mozart thing, and it's like Mozart wanted to be him, so
Yeah, I definitely think like it's funny that they're calling him the Black Mozart. They should really be calling Mozart the White Balloon, right? People are so jealous of him. Um, just talking about other famous black composers. You mentioned Florence Price. She's actually probably my favorite black composer. I heard it on Classico KUSC, her Fourth Symphony, and I wasn't really paying attention to it, but I really loved it. So I listened to all of her symphonies, and I listened to her first symphony. I believe it starts with a bassoon solo, and after like just like a couple seconds in, I stopped listening and said I have to listen to this with headphones because this is just like acoustically is amazing and her orchestration is so good. Um, I recently did a summer festival and we played her dances in the cane breaks, I believe. Uh, and also, I mean, she just does fantastic music. Um, I've also done a lot of George Walker. I did the presentation on his cello concerto, and we played the lyric for strings at my school. And also William Brown Still, I did his Afro American Symphony last summer. So I just want to ask you guys who your favorite Black composers are.
My favorite Black composer is probably Adolphus Hailstork. Um, I got a little nickname for him. I hope he doesn't find out. Um, but I've done like I wouldn't say extensive research, but I've done a bit of research on his viola works. And got to interview him. I've done presentations on his pieces. So I really like that he, you know, features the viola a lot in his composition. Like it's always at the forefront of his mind. His chamber music parts are very good for viola. That might have something to do with his friendship with Beverly Kane Baker, who was the former principal violist of the Virginia Symphony, where he's based. I think he's based in either Norfolk. I think it's Norfolk. Um, so definitely Hailstork. Smart.
I know her and Hell's best friends.
That's literally not true. He
She's
doesn't. He
she's
couldn't pick me
on
out.
her own and is giving celebrity status.
That's insane.
I would say a black composer that I'm really into right now is Amanda Alabaka.
Mhm.
They like we actually know them. But I remember I was on doing like a listening thing and they're like, "Oh, can I play something?" And like I love their music. Something that they're a commission that they're working on right now. But they also, have a bunch of stuff on their website. Katie played one of their pieces on one of her recitals. Yeah, so um, I'm really into their music and just living composers to trying to give them their shine.
Are probably Delaney, you are. Are you aware of Esperanza Spalding?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I actually like just a couple days ago watched a contemporary performance by her with an Quintro's orchestra. It was great. It was a LA Phil commission piece. I forgot the composer's name. He was black, but it's called Gaia, and it was sort of like a cool jazz. Um, it had her band. It had the bass, the piano, the drums, the I think acoustic, um, and then it had an orchestra backing. I thought it was really cool. It kind of felt like there was a cadenza part where it was just a band in the middle,
Mm.
and you know, uh, black people have sort of been associated with because, uh, I, understandably, jazz. And do you think it'd be jazz being associated with classical music more is the direction you'd like to see?
I never thought about that. Literally never. Because even like you study jazz at a conservatory, there's it's just so separate. You know.
Yeah. Well, I think I feel like it depends on like the power balance of the relationship because like if you go to conservatory, there is some connection and interaction between classical and jazz. Ways like the jazz students have to learn the classical stuff. Like they treat classical music as the foundation for what they have to do. And so it's like they have to take classical theory up to a point and then they take their jazz theory. They have to take classical music history and then they take jazz music history, but we don't have to do any of that. Like we don't have to learn anything about jazz you know, if you don't want to. And so I think that if there is going to be like interactions, that I think should be treated, like its own like art form because it is.
So it's more like keep it separate and keep the culture on its own ends, right?
I think, there's been a lot of interaction between, like, if you think about it, there's jazz symphonies and there's symphonic jazz, and those are like, they're different, but they're kind of both in that middle ground. And I think that's okay. Like, I think people should be able to use like whatever influences they want to. I just think that like a that jazz is like viewed in classical institutions should be given a little bit more like respect.
Great answer. Thank you. Katie, do you have anything to add on to that?
Oh, I don't think so. I've literally never thought about that. Like literally ever. That's a really interesting question. But like what I will say is I do agree with like how we approach black genres in general. I think there's just no respect um from classical musicians often the other way. So I think that needs to be established first before you do anything else.
Right. And before we end things off, we have some just standard mental health questions that we choose to ask all of our guests. Um, so, do the both of you believe that there's enough mental health resources within the classical music community?
No.
No.
No. Are there any? I mean, besides your podcast, like, are there anything
Yeah, I
outside?
mean, that's why we started the project, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's sort of the answer we get with everybody. There's really nothing.
Like, there's literally you just grin and bear it, or
Like, and I feel like there's not even like, even before resources, even like an acknowledgement of some of the like behaviors that cause people to need those resources. Like, they're just not. It's just not there.
So what resources would you guys like to see?
I don't even know because I also even wonder like it's gonna sound real bad, but I'm just gonna say it. I wonder if the nature of classical music is even conducive to like really good mental health because it's just like you every week for an hour somebody tells you everything you need to improve on, then you go for 20 to 30 hours that week and you hyperfixate on fixing those things, and then you got people that are also doing the same things you're doing it better than you. Like I'm wondering, are there classical musicians with good mental health?
So,
Or like without a little sprinkling of something, like a little sprinkling of
Everybody,
anxiety.
to be fair, everybody got a sprinkler.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
except for like the really young prodigies that probably never feel stress in their life, or they probably do, but at least not competition, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know because I don't even know. I You say like what do we want to see? I don't even know what that how that would look.
All right. Well, here let me rephrase the question then. Let's say you're back at Eastman, you're going for your PhD now. What would make your experience more enjoyable in terms of mental health? Whether that's, I don't know, maybe extra counseling or maybe just more discussions. I know like the youth orchestra program I'm in, every single Saturday that we had to meet, we would basically um, talk to each other about like things outside of classical music because it's harder to be like toxic to someone that you actually know, right? If it's just like you know someone based off like, oh, this person is ahead of me in seating, or this person's going to pass me up, then that's what you think of them as. But when you start to know them as like their own person with their own identity, maybe that could help. Is that something you guys think would have helped at your experiences at Eastman?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about what would have helped. I mean, first of all, I have like a saying about what Katie was talking about, like how being a classical musician is not very conducive to having self confidence because there's so much criticism, and you really have to be able to like be mindful of managing how much criticism you accept. Because I always say I think everyone's opinion matters, but not everybody's opinion matters to me. So if I really am mindful of like unsolicited advice and stuff like that because we get a lot of it, and because we're so used to taking in criticism and what we just want to get better. It's an honest thing. I think a lot of classical musicians tend to take on more criticism than is healthy for a person. I think what Eastman, more black people would have been helpful, more resources for us because there were so few black people when we started a Black Students Union. When you don't have a large population of people, a lot of work falls on a very small amount of people. And so it was like, it got to the point where I was like kind of the go-to person for diversity stuff at Eastman. It's like all that 50 or so percent of white people get to just practice and go to class. But I have to do all the, diversity stuff because, you know, I feel like the school could have given a little bit more support there. So that's some institutional support there. Um, and then yeah, just like being kinder about criticism and stuff like that in classical music, and having a life outside of it is also a, a really great mental health thing. Like, I forgot Katie even played the viola. That's how little we talked about classical music when we were in college.
Oh, Eastman offers counseling services, so I don't even want to say that. I don't know. Like I have to. I think I'm so deep in it now. Like especially like in this transitional period of like taking auditions and having to deal with those battles that like I don't really know what to say just because I don't think I'm jaded. I still love playing the viola. I love classical music, but um I don't know what that balance would look like because a lot of people like I think there should be more realistic like conversations about what is realistic in classical music as you're training. Like one thing that I always say, I always take a day off. I mean, do I have a day off right now? Yeah. So I used to have a full day off, but I have a lesson on Sundays now. So I don't play the rest of the day. But before that, I took Sundays off, and everyone thought it was like the weirdest thing. They were always gasped. I'm just like, you don't take a day off of your instrument, and it's just like stuff like that, like kind of debunking some of the unhealthy behaviors. I think that might help, but honestly, I don't know. The nature of it is you have to practice. So I don't, and sometimes practicing makes you sad. So that's the issue for me. It's like I don't know what it would look like outside of counseling and more conversations.
Well, you know, kind of talking about our project, we do kind of talk about that a lot on ours. I think particularly you mentioned taking breaks, and you know, there's like memes like two set violin. Oh, practice every single day. Practice for as much as you can.
Oh,
Uh,
started on
and
that.
it's something that kind of I really don't like. I know like a lot of my friends, um, they always say like, oh, let's not hang out because we're gonna practice. Like we have to practice. And you know, on one hand, like I respect the discipline, but at the same time, it's kind of like, what are you practicing like every single free time you get? I feel like it gets to a point where it's excessive, and I'd actually say it's illogical to practice that much. I think personally, like if I practice more than 3 hours, I start losing focus, and sort of just it's at that point it's just like forcing yourself to move your arms around, right? It's not actually forcing yourself to learn. Um, so that you know that's something we definitely want to expand on as we grow. And Delaney, you were talking about how you wish there were more black people at Eastman, and you know like the Black Student Union you had to do on your own. Uh, so I think that since we're wrapping up, I think it'd be good if you talked about your own podcast and how I think I mean I wouldn't know, I guess, but I think it probably helps a lot of black people hearing your podcast because they're hearing um, classical musicians in like that, and they don't have to like do it themselves. They don't have to start their own podcast. You guys are doing it for them. So if you guys just want to talk about your podcast and plug it a little bit, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, we started Classically Black because we kind of wanted some sort of standing black community, but like we realized that we were all sort of spread out. There's a good amount of black classical musicians. Obviously, we want to see more, but we're like all over the place, all over the country, all over the world, and so we wanted something that was like people don't have to physically come. It's not a conference. It's not anything like that. That people can just listen to, and we have gotten like letters from people who are like, "Oh, I feel so seen by Classically Black," and um, that's obvious. That's like really cool. First of all, that people are listening to our show, which is just crazy. But yeah,
Yeah, and you can listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. We're everywhere.
Thank you. And on that, I think we'll end this interview. Thank you, Katie and Delanie, for taking time out of your busy schedules to do this. And if you want mental health resources, check out our website. It's in our description. Everything's 100% free. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.